The year was 1950, and the quiet town of Colorado Springs looked like any other peaceful American neighborhood. Clean streets, smiling families, and rows of houses painted in the same soft pastel colors. But inside one of those homes, a large white house on Hidden Pine Street, something strange was happening to the Galvin family. Donald and Mimi Galvin were the perfect American couple. He worked for the military base. She stayed home with the children. They had 12 kids, 10 boys and 2 girls, and their neighbors admired them for their discipline and family values. But behind the smiles and Sunday church visits, the Galvin home carried a secret that no one dared to speak about. It began with the oldest son, Donald Jr. He was a quiet boy, intelligent, polite, and very close to his younger brothers. But one day, something changed. He stopped talking at school, spent hours staring out the window, and whispered strange things to himself. Mimi thought it was just stress. But soon, Donald began locking himself in the basement for hours, scribbling words and symbols all over the walls. When his father confronted him, Donald said something that terrified the entire family. "They're watching us," he whispered. "Not from outside, from inside our blood." The family tried to ignore it. They thought he was just imagining things. But soon after, the same behavior started showing up in the second son, Matthew. He began waking up in the middle of the night, screaming that he could hear the voices of his brothers inside his head. Mimi started keeping a notebook, writing down every strange thing that happened in the house. Doors would slam without wind. The lights flickered whenever one of the boys had a breakdown. Once she found 3 of them sitting silently in a row, staring at nothing, their pupils dilated, their faces blank. Donald Sr. tried to keep the family together. He believed in order, in control. But as months passed, he too began to sense something wrong. It wasn't just mental illness, it felt like something was spreading, like a sickness running through their bloodline. Doctors were called, priests were invited, even psychiatrists from the nearby Air Force hospital came to investigate. Every time, the result was the same: possible schizophrenia, hereditary. But one night, Mimi found something that changed everything. Donald Jr. had left a notebook under his bed. Inside were pages filled with strange diagrams, family trees connected by symbols that looked like DNA strands. At the bottom of one page, in shaky handwriting, he had written, "It began before us. It was given, not born." Mimi didn't understand what it meant, but she felt something deep inside her chest. Fear mixed with guilt. She remembered something her grandmother once said before she died. "Our blood carries more than life." As the years went on, the Galvin boys grew up, but the madness grew stronger. Out of 10 sons, 6 began showing the same symptoms. They heard voices, saw shadows, and spoke in languages they never learned. The local church called it a curse. Scientists called it a rare genetic disorder. But one man, Dr. Howard Reeves, a geneticist from Denver, thought it was something else entirely. He came to visit the family after hearing rumors from the hospital staff. He asked for permission to study their blood samples. Mimi agreed, desperate for answers. When the results came back, Dr. Reeves was silent. The blood from the 6 affected sons showed a rare mutation, something not documented in any known human gene. It appeared as a small extra sequence in their DNA, almost like an inserted code. He described it in his notes as an anomaly beyond explanation, artificially patterned, almost as if written, not evolved. Mimi demanded to know what it meant. Dr. Reeves simply said, "Someone, or something, interfered with your family's bloodline long before you were born." Not long after, the doctor's lab in Denver burned down. The official report said it was an accident. But his assistant told a different story, that men in black suits came a week before, asking for all the Galvin files. Meanwhile, inside the Galvin home, the situation worsened. One of the sons disappeared after claiming he saw what was inside him. Another locked himself in the attic and refused to eat for days. The younger children began to fear their own brothers. Neighbors started noticing the smell of burnt chemicals coming from the house and strange humming sounds at night. When questioned, Donald Sr. said it was just a generator problem. But one evening, a mailman delivering letters saw something through the window. A group of the Galvin boys sitting around a small glowing object on the table, their faces lit by pale blue light. The mailman quit his job the next day. By 1955, the Galvin home had turned into a fortress, curtains always drawn, doors always locked. Even the postman stopped knocking. Inside, Mimi kept her notebook, now filled with hundreds of pages. The last entry she ever wrote said, "It's not madness, it's memory." One night during a thunderstorm, a police car stopped near the Galvin house after hearing screams. When officers entered, they found the living room empty, but the walls were covered with writing in red ink, equations, names, and the same strange spiral symbol seen in Donald's notebook. In the basement, they found 6 chairs arranged in a circle. In the center was a large mirror, cracked down the middle. On the back of the mirror, written in ash, were the words, "We finally found the source." No one ever understood what that meant. The Galvin family was quietly relocated by government order to an unknown facility. The neighbors were told the house was contaminated with toxic mold. Within a week, the property was demolished. But Dr. Reeves's burned research was never recovered. Only one page survived, found years later by a janitor cleaning out an old government storage building. It read, "The Galvin anomaly is not unique. Traces found in multiple families across the western states. Spread seems intentional." Since then, whispers about the Galvin family became an urban legend, a genetic mystery that haunted Colorado for decades. But the truth, buried in secret reports and destroyed records, suggested something far worse. Because what started with the Galvin family wasn't an accident of nature, it was the beginning of a plan. In the years that followed the disappearance of the Galvin family, Colorado Springs moved on. The house was gone, the land sold, and the story turned into nothing more than a small-town legend. But not everyone forgot. In 1963, a young researcher named Dr. Evelyn Clark joined a classified genetics program run quietly by the U.S. military. Her supervisor handed her a folder stamped Top Secret, Case G. Inside were faded photographs, blood test reports, and one chilling note. "Family relocated under protection. 6 subjects remain unstable. Containment necessary." Evelyn had never seen anything like it. The DNA charts looked impossible. One strand showed a repeating pattern that did not exist in any known species. It was as if the Galvin blood had been rewritten by something not human. When she asked her supervisor where the samples came from, he said coldly, "You don't need to know. Your job is to study the mutation, not the people." But Evelyn was curious. Late at night, she copied one of the files and took it home. She read it over and over again. It spoke of something called Project Echo, a covert experiment that began in the early 1940s. Its goal was to enhance human evolution through exposure to electromagnetic frequencies that could activate dormant genetic sequences. According to the notes, the Galvin family was part of the second generation of subjects. The mutation they carried wasn't random, it was designed. Days later, Evelyn visited the underground laboratory known as Site 9, where some of the surviving Galvin sons were supposedly held. The guards warned her not to speak unless necessary. When she entered the observation room, she saw 6 men sitting quietly in separate glass cells. They were grown now, pale, motionless, and expressionless. One of them turned his head toward her as she passed by. His eyes were clouded, but somehow he seemed to look directly into her thoughts. Evelyn froze. The man smiled faintly and whispered something she couldn't hear through the glass. "What did he say?" she asked the guard. The guard hesitated. "He said, welcome back, Mother." Her hands trembled. "He doesn't even know me." The guard replied quietly, "They all say that, to everyone." For months, Evelyn studied their blood samples, but every result defied logic. The DNA changed every few weeks, rearranging itself like it was alive, as if it was learning. One report described the mutation as self-correcting, capable of healing, adapting, and even resisting lab manipulation. Then one night, a containment alarm went off. Sirens echoed through Site 9. When Evelyn arrived, chaos had taken over. One of the Galvin subjects, identified as Subject 3, had somehow opened his cell door without any visible tools. The guards found him standing in the corridor, staring at the security cameras. He whispered a single phrase before collapsing. "We were never sick. We were built." After that, the military shut down Site 9. All 6 subjects were transferred to a hidden facility in Nevada, and every scientist involved, including Evelyn, was ordered to sign a lifelong confidentiality agreement. But Evelyn couldn't forget what she'd seen. She started collecting her own notes secretly, writing down every strange detail. She became obsessed with the Galvin mutation, convinced it was connected to something much older, something that began long before science existed. Years later, in 1975, she found a clue. A declassified document from the post-war archives mentioned a Nazi geneticist named Dr. Wilhelm Strauss, the same name that appeared in older files related to Project Genesis in South America. The report claimed Strauss had been brought to the United States under Operation Paperclip and had worked with the Air Force on genetic experiments in Colorado Springs during the 1940s. Evelyn's blood ran cold. The pieces were finally fitting together. The Galvin family wasn't just unlucky. They were part of a continuing line of human experimentation that began decades earlier. She started tracing government records and found something even more disturbing. There were other families across the U.S. with similar mental illness cases, all living near old Air Force test sites. Some of their children had the same mutation. The connection was undeniable. One night, Evelyn received an unmarked envelope at her doorstep. Inside was a single photograph, a black and white image of 6 men in hospital gowns sitting in a circle. Behind them stood a shadowy figure in a lab coat. The back of the photo read, "Site 9, phase complete." There was also a note, "If you keep digging, they'll come for you too." She knew what that meant, but she couldn't stop. The following month, she met a retired Air Force technician who once worked at Site 9. His hands shook as he told her what he saw before the facility was closed. "They weren't human anymore," he said. "They could hear us from behind the walls. When we whispered, they whispered back the same words, before we even spoke them." He claimed one of them had drawn something on his cell floor, a perfect spiral made of blood, identical to the symbols found in the Galvin home years earlier. Evelyn asked, "Where are they now?" The man looked terrified. "They moved them underground, under Cheyenne Mountain. They said it was for national security. But that mountain, it's not a base anymore. It's something else." The next day, the technician vanished. His house was found empty, his phone disconnected. By 1980, Dr. Evelyn Clark disappeared too. The official report said she drowned during a field trip near Pikes Peak, but no body was ever found. However, in 1983, a construction crew working near the old Galvin property uncovered a sealed metal box buried under the ground. Inside were Evelyn's handwritten notes. The last page said, "The Galvin code isn't a mutation. It's a message written in flesh. The blood remembers." Soon after that discovery, the workers who found the box reported strange symptoms, ringing in the ears, sleep paralysis, and hearing whispers when no one was around. Within weeks, the site was sealed off again by federal agents. Locals still say that late at night, you can hear faint voices coming from beneath the ground where the Galvin house once stood. Voices that repeat the same phrase over and over, "We were built to remember." In the year 2024, Colorado Springs had changed. New buildings, new families, and new faces filled the quiet neighborhoods that once held forgotten secrets. But beneath the surface, the shadow of the Galvin family still lingered, waiting to be uncovered. A young biology student named Noah Reed had always been fascinated by strange unsolved cases. While researching old medical archives, he came across a classified file labeled the Galvin Anomaly. It contained fragments of old reports, faded photographs, and the same spiral symbol drawn in red ink. Curiosity consumed him. He began digging deeper, tracing every name connected to the Galvins. That's when he found Dr. Evelyn Clark, missing since 1980. Noah didn't believe she was dead. Something told him her disappearance was connected to the Galvin bloodline. He uploaded one of the Galvin DNA sequences into a modern genome database. The program instantly flagged it with a warning. Sequence matches unidentified subjects. Access restricted by Department of Defense. Noah's heart raced. How could a family case from the 1950s still be under government restriction after 70 years? The next day, he received a strange email from an untraceable address. It read only one line. "Stop digging. They never left." But instead of stopping, Noah went further. He compared the Galvin DNA to modern population data. And what he found froze him. The same mutated pattern appeared in 17 living people, spread across 5 states. None of them knew each other, but all had ancestors who lived near military test sites. He decided to contact one of them, a woman named Mara Jensen, who lived just 2 hours from Colorado Springs. When he visited her home, she seemed nervous but agreed to talk. She told him strange things had been happening for years. Hearing voices in her sleep, sudden blackouts, and a repeating dream of standing in a dark room filled with humming machines. Noah asked her if she had ever heard of the Galvin family. Mara shook her head, but when he showed her the spiral symbol, her eyes widened. "I've seen that," she whispered. "It's in my basement, carved into the floor." They both went downstairs. The spiral was there, old, faint, and surrounded by small, circular burn marks. In the center of it lay a rusted metal tag with the number S9 engraved on it. That night, Noah couldn't sleep. He rechecked his research, connecting the tag to the old Site 9 facility that Dr. Evelyn Clark once worked in. He realized the mutation hadn't died with the original Galvins. It had been quietly passed on for generations. 2 days later, Noah returned to Mara's house, but she was gone. The neighbors said men in black SUVs came at dawn and took her away. No one knew where. He tried calling her number, but it was disconnected. Then he noticed something chilling. On his laptop screen, a small red dot blinked beside his name on the database. The system had tagged him as exposed. Within hours, his apartment was raided. His hard drives were taken, his research deleted. But Noah had hidden one thing they couldn't erase: Evelyn Clark's recovered notes, which he had secretly uploaded to a private cloud. One of the notes described something terrifying. Mutation expresses under stress. Increased electromagnetic fields trigger neural synchronization between subjects. Noah finally understood. The Galvin bloodline wasn't a disease, it was a system, a network. When one descendant was activated, the others could feel it. That's why Mara heard voices. She was hearing the others. Desperate, Noah went to the old Galvin property. It was empty land now, fenced off and overgrown with weeds. But in the middle stood a rusted metal hatch covered in chains. When he pulled the lock, he felt a vibration under the ground, a faint humming sound like electricity. He climbed down the hatch ladder and found himself inside an old tunnel lined with concrete walls. The air was cold, the smell of rust thick, As he moved deeper, flickering lights revealed a room full of abandoned medical equipment. On the wall, someone had written in red paint, "The blood remembers." Then he heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming closer. A figure appeared from the shadows, tall, pale, with blank eyes. Noah froze. It looked almost human, but its face twitched unnaturally, like a glitching image. The voice that came from it was calm, but hollow. "Evelyn said you would come." Noah whispered. "Who are you?" The figure stepped forward. "We are what she made, what they tried to hide." It raised its hand, and Noah felt a sharp pressure in his head. He dropped to his knees as flashes of memory filled his mind. Images of the Galvin children, Site 9, the experiments, and Evelyn standing beside the machines. She was speaking into a recorder. "If anyone finds this, the Galvin code is not a curse. It's evolution's next step, but they don't want the world to know." When Noah opened his eyes, the figure was gone. Only the sound of the humming remained. He stumbled out of the tunnel just as dawn began to break. That morning, the entire area was sealed off by military vehicles. Reporters tried to ask questions, but the government called it a chemical contamination zone. Weeks later, strange things began to happen again. People across the U.S. reported hearing faint static whispers through their radios, even when unplugged. Hospitals recorded patients waking up speaking languages they had never learned. Scientists dismissed it as coincidence. But deep inside a new research facility hidden beneath the Rocky Mountains, men in lab coats stood before a large monitor displaying a single moving DNA strand. The strand pulsed softly like a heartbeat. The screen labeled it Subject Line G, Active. And somewhere, in a quiet apartment far from Colorado, Noah Reed sat in darkness, staring at his reflection. His nose began to bleed. His eyes flickered like a broken screen. He whispered softly to himself, or perhaps to someone else, "We were built to remember."